So I've started 4 or 5 different businesses now, and every single time that I was transitioning from one business to another, I had to make the fundamental yet incredibly important decision that you see right there, which is the push versus pivot decision. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how I make the decision to push or pivot so that you hopefully too can have a better understanding of when it is time to push and when it is time to pivot so that you can get from wherever you are to wherever you want to be. So push versus pivot. Fundamentally, this is the approach anytime I run into conflict, right? Anytime I run into a situation I don't want to be in, my business isn't growing, I'm losing money, I'm losing whatever, I'm not getting to where I want to be, right? What is push versus pivot? Well, fundamentally, you have a choice between 2 options in business, right? And when we're talking about push versus pivot, push is obviously pushing through, right? Getting to whatever that next level, next stage, next option is. Or pivot, mainly used as a basketball term, at least in my life. Pivoting, right? Switching to a new thing, right? Or changing your approach, right? Pivoting either the thing, pivoting the approach. But again, at a base level, when you pivot, it means that you are moving your direction, right? You're kind of changing up the direction. So that's the basics of the push versus the pivot. So push versus pivot is one of the main reasons why so many people jump from whatever they were doing to the next thing, right? That is them pivoting. But the question is, when is it a good time to pivot? And when are people just pivoting because it's the easier option to make? So I want to give some examples in my life of times when I've had to make this decision, and also just maybe a little bit more generic that a lot of you guys might be running into. So first of all, we can just use lending, transactional lending as an example. A lot of you guys know me for transactional lending. And so in transactional lending, here's the scenario. And first I have to, I guess, explain how I make this decision. So at a base level, it is always easier to pivot. And typically speaking, in my opinion, whatever is easiest is usually not the route that's going to have the most benefit, right? It's going to be the most beneficial to you. Not at all. In fact, pivoting is usually just going to be switching to whatever the easiest thing is. And 99% of people do that, which is why there's no such thing as competition. So if you are somebody that can push through instead, then you're going to get to the prize faster. You're going to get a bigger prize. You're going to be in the 1%, which is what we want to pull off. So pushing through is something that I try to make the decision for anytime that my belief hasn't changed. But the easier way to describe it, I guess, is answering the basic question, when should I pivot? In my opinion, the time to pivot is when my fundamental beliefs about what I am doing have changed. That is when I pivot. If my beliefs have not changed, my fundamental beliefs, not the belief, not like, oh, I thought this was going to be easy, but it turns out it was hard. It's not my fundamental belief. My fundamental belief about what I'm doing has changed. That's when I determine to pivot. So transactional lending, as my example, you see me lending every day. If lending feels hard, then move the highest success. The highest success move for you would be to push on, right? This seems hard. That means if it seems hard to me, then it's probably feeling hard for everybody else. Most people are going to quit. I don't want to be most people, so I push on, right? Example A for transactional lending. Now, on the other hand, let's say, I'll use me as an example. You guys watch me talk about this stuff all the time. Let's say that you found out a scandal comes out, right? In the world of people who care about me, which is like 5 people. But let's say a scandal comes out and it's like, oh, Ryan was lying this entire time about transactional lending. He's actually not making any money in transactional lending. Or maybe transactional lending becomes illegal, right? Something changes, wholesale becomes illegal, whatever. Now we're talking about a position where the fundamental belief, not just the belief of whether it's going to be easy or hard, but the fundamental belief behind transactional lending has changed. And you no longer can say, oh, well, lending is a great way to make money. It's a great way to quit my job. In my opinion, it's a lot better than wholesaling, all that good stuff, right? You can no longer say that because the fundamental belief behind it has changed. So I got into transactional lending because I believed that it was an effective way to replace my W-2 income, right? That's my thesis. Then 6 months in, I found out that Ryan was lying about transactional lending, and it's actually a terrible way to replace my income. It's not even possible. It doesn't even make any money. I believed that it made Ryan a bunch of money, but he was lying, and it wasn't true. My fundamental belief has changed. So I am going to pivot away from transactional lending because it's not what I believed it to be, right? That is my example in transactional lending. Now, examples in my own life. There's a couple different examples. I'll just give you basically the timeline of my life up to this point. So when I was getting started, the first thing that I tried in kind of the whole real estate investing world, I guess you can call it, was wholesaling, right? It was a different type of wholesaling than what I got into later, which I'll touch on. But it was a method of wholesaling basically where I was doing a lot of cold outreach to people I didn't know, trying to find wholesale deals, just trying to make some money, just like everybody else. And so I was getting into the wholesale stuff, trying to figure things out. And my fundamental belief behind that wholesaling was what I had been told, which is that it was one of the most effective methods of wholesale. I was doing a large amount of cold outreach, lots of DMing, lots of cold calls / like scheduled calls, whatever you want to call it. I believed that it was what I was going to enjoy the most, and so that's why I dove in. And then pretty quickly, I had the realization, and I did this not just through my own experience, but through talking to people, which is a very important thing, especially in my opinion, when it comes to having a clear understanding of what you're doing, whether it's, you're trying out the new drop shipping course or whatever the heck it is. Talking to people that are actually doing it, right? And trying to find like normal people that are not actually doing it, not just, the top 2 people that you saw running an ad or in somebody else's ad. Like, screw those people because they're probably an anomaly. Go find the people that are more normal and talk to them, right? So that's what I did. I got connected with people that were trying out the method of wholesaling that I was doing. And they were like, yeah, we thought this, this, and this. We got into it for a bit. Turns out it's not quite as much as we had thought, whatever the thing is. And so when I talked to them, they basically verified my realization, which was that form of wholesaling was not going to be helpful in me accomplishing my goals. Now, this was also very early on in my real estate journey, so I wasn't exactly like super level-headed and clear when it comes to all this stuff. So I probably could have pushed on, but I chose to pivot in that situation because I had this trigger moment where it was like, oh, I believed it was this, it was not, I'm going to jump to the next thing. Another thing that I realized, which is interesting because we'll kind of come back to this in a minute, but with the wholesaling, in my head, it was like I got sold into a program like everybody else, right? They can be good, they can be bad. I got sold into a mentorship and it was like build wealth with real estate, right? It's like, yeah, and you jump in and everybody tells you get started with wholesaling. And you're like, okay, whatever you say, boss. And you get started with wholesaling. I got started with wholesaling. And then one of those realizations was like, wait a second, this isn't building any wealth. This isn't actually building wealth. This is just a way to make money like I do at my job, right? So that was another realization I had. When I had that realization, I was like, okay, well, if wholesaling isn't building wealth, then how should I build wealth? Well, the normal answer to that is you buy rental properties, right? So I was like, all right, I'm going to buy rental properties. But me being me, I didn't want to go to whatever the normal level was, which is like buying one house at a time. So I found people that were buying apartment buildings and they were doing 50, 100, 300, 500 units at a time. And I was like, yes, that's what I want. Here's why I made that decision. I had a job at the time that I loved. And what I was finding out about multifamily was that it takes a while to get into it. And since it takes a while to get into it, a lot of people don't do it because they need money now. I did not need money now. So it felt like the perfect storm. It was like, clearly you can make a lot of money in the long run, but it can be a struggle up front. If you need money, I don't need the money right now because I have a job that I love. So this is perfect. So I jumped in, built a team, 3+ months doing it, learned everything I could, underwrote a bunch of deals, talked to brokers every single day. As is with anything I do, I was pretty dialed in. Now, again, I faced a push versus pivot moment. What was it? Well, when I was doing multifamily and getting into it, I was operating under the fundamental belief that I enjoyed my job and I did not need money at the time, and that multifamily was a great tool of building wealth in the long run. Now, to be clear, multifamily is a great tool for building wealth, and I will be getting into it eventually. So what changed? Well, it wasn't the fact that it was for building wealth. So it was this other one over here, which was the belief or the idea or the concept that I did not need money because I thoroughly enjoyed my job. Why did that change? Because things happened, shocker, at my job. Changes were made, and I no longer enjoyed my job. And because I no longer wanted to be in my job, the pivot that had to be made was I was doing something that was not going to bring in money for a while. I now needed to bring in money if I wanted to be able to leave this job. And as my priorities shifted and leaving my job became the top priority, I had to pivot out of what I was doing, or I chose to pivot, I guess. I didn't have to. I chose to pivot out of what I was doing because it was not making me money right then, and that had become the new priority. So, month 1, month 2 of multifamily, it was just difficult. Lots of numbers, a lot of hours on the phone, but nothing had changed. So I pushed forward. When I got to month 3, month 4, the fundamental change at my work changed my beliefs around what I was doing. So instead of pushing forward again, I pivoted. And I pivoted to wholesale. Now, why did I pivot to wholesale? I could get into a lot of reasons for this because there's a lot of them. But at the end of the day, a couple things happened. First of all, there was other people that were similar age to me, people to who I am, I guess, that were having success wholesaling creative deals on market, right? And I love being able to relate to people because then it's even easier in my head to be like, if they can do it, so can I, And so I was like, all right, they're doing it well, it's working out for them. If they can do it, so can I. I'm going to copy exactly what they're doing. I'm going to go make money. And why was I getting back into wholesaling after quitting? Well, because the first time my fundamental belief was that I was getting into something that was going to build wealth. I realized I wasn't, so I pivoted to multifamily. Then I realized that my primary focus went from I want to build this empire, build wealth, whatever, to I need to make money right now to replace my job. And wholesaling was a very popular avenue to do exactly that. So instead of continuing on, I switched to wholesale because now active income had become a higher priority for me. So it made sense, right? Pivot to the new thing. Even if it was kind of backwards. It was a different type of wholesaling. One of them before that I was doing was more like cash wholesaling. This was creative wholesaling. Now this is by far the thing that I spent the most time in prior to where I'm at now. I built a wholesale team. I had an amazing wholesale partner in Houston, not the city. His name was Houston. Confusing. And we were crushing it and we were making pretty good money. And we did that for a while, a decent amount of time, about half a year, more or less. But as time went on, shocker, again, it became difficult, right? But we pushed on, right? We had some people quit. We lost some money, this, that, and the other, whatever. But we pushed on, right? Because nothing had changed. It was just becoming difficult. But then something did change. After enough experience, enough time, and enough talking to, again, I can't emphasize this enough, the right people doing what I was doing. Don't talk to the people that are having a perfect time. Talk to the other people so that you can get a more level-headed understanding of what's going on. After talking to the right people, I realized that wholesaling creative deals was not a good idea. And some people might be listening to this right now and they're like, what? What are you talking about? I don't know when this video is getting watched. This is my opinion. But wholesaling creative deals was not a good idea. And that's pretty subjective, but let's get into it a little bit. So my belief was that you wholesale a deal, you make 10 grand, it's hunky-dory, we're all happy, and we move on to the next one. In cash wholesale, that is oftentimes the case. In creative deals, it is not. Because in a creative deal, you are keeping the prior seller on in the transaction. Whether it's a sub-2, seller finance, whatever deal, you're keeping that previous seller on. The previous seller remains responsible for what's going on. And so instead of a cash wholesale deal where you just wash your hands, boom, this was great, we're done, move on to the next one. This is like, hey, I'm going to wholesale this deal and like for the rest of forever, if anything goes wrong, I'm going to be responsible. Now, at some point, I'll do a video about the emotion curve and you can understand which place is which on that thing. But I can tell you at the beginning when we were in stage 1 of the emotional curve, we didn't see those things. We just saw the opportunity to make money because that's what everybody else was doing. But as you get down the line, we realized, hey, and actually it wasn't even realizing. We realized it through bad experience. So we wholesale deals, and a couple months down the road, after we were on this high of like, we're making money, this is awesome, we're a bunch of legends, let's go, we realized that it was not what we thought, and the way we realized it was because things took a turn and deals started going poorly. And what I mean is people started defaulting on loans, stopped paying. People started having their credit be affected, their homes be affected. Things started going down that we did not realize was possible because we were not told about these things. Everything is always painted in the light of whoever is painting the picture for you to see. And so we did not see these things. And so when that started to go bad, I went down real fast. It's like, this, not only is this not what we thought, this is like worse than I could have imagined. This is terrible. Like, we should not be doing this stuff. But it was my only source of income. And the crazy part is, when I made the pivot, which I think was the correct decision to make, to pivot from multifamily back into wholesaling, I was able to generate enough money to quit my job. So at that point I had quit my job and I was reliant on that wholesale income that had got me out of, which I was very grateful, but I was relying on that income. So now I'm stuck in a position where we've pushed through the hard stuff, we've made the money, but now my fundamental belief about wholesaling on-market deals has changed. I believe that it was a great idea to make money. Now my fundamental belief has become, this is not a good idea, this is not safe, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And true to my nature, true to what I've talked about in the push versus pivot decision making, I could not push any further down that path once that belief had changed, once I had realized those things. I had to pivot. Nothing else made sense. I had to pivot out of that stuff and get to something that was going to accomplish my goals, but that would actually fall in line with my values, that would be something I enjoyed working on, that would be something that I actually believed in. And that was definitely not the final, but the most recent major pivot from wholesaling into what I do now primarily, which is transactional lending, right? And so I know that was kind of a long story, but it's a lot of different scenarios, at least one of which I bet a lot of people watching this video can relate to, on when to determine whether you are pushing or pivoting. So when times are good, the best thing to do really is to push even harder. But usually you're not thinking about that stuff. But it's when times are not good that you're running into a situation where you have to make this decision. And all I can say is, if times are just difficult because things are getting hard, because it's not as easy as you thought it would be, whatever, down that path, that is the time to push, and push as hard as you can. And most of the time, that is the scenario that you find yourself in. That's the scenario I find myself in right now with a lot of things I'm doing. My beliefs haven't changed. Things are just getting freaking tough. And that happens all the time. Entrepreneurship 101. But if what you are doing, if something changes, you talk to somebody new, you find out something, a law changes, your experiences build up, and you get to the point where your fundamental belief about what you're doing has changed, in my experience and in my opinion, that is the time that you pivot. And you may not know what you're pivoting to. I certainly didn't, right? I'm on Skool now, building communities, teaching other people how to lend. I did not expect to be doing that stuff. I didn't know what the pivot would look like, but it didn't matter because it was important enough for me to pivot away from what I was doing and go find that next thing. And when you create the environment and the space for yourself to be able to find that stuff out and figure that stuff out, that's the most important thing. And so I made that decision to pivot, and you can too. So I hope this video has been helpful. If you're in a situation where you need to figure out whether you push on or pivot, use what I've talked about and figure out, is this a scenario that's just difficult, or is this a scenario where something that I once believed to be true is no longer true? I hope if you do that, it can help you make that decision. I appreciate all of you guys, and I will see you in the next video.